Nathan Zegura, joined once again by the head coach of your Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski, for this week's game preview presented by Ticketmaster. And it is a return home for the Browns to First Energy Stadium, where they will take on the visiting Detroit Lions, 0-8-1. And before we get into that Lions team, which is much better than its record would indicate, Coach, I just want to talk about your team, the state of it. Where are we at with the health players and how it's trending for Sunday?
Yeah, I think the guys are working really hard in that rehab room and in the training room to try and get back. There's guys I think that will get back in the next couple of weeks. There's guys that are fighting to make it back this week. So it's really the nature of the NFL where you really don't have a ton of clarity throughout the week potentially. Once you get into Friday, you might have a better sense of who might go, but that's kind of how we've been. I really think since week one, kind of there's going to be little things, and we'll see how they trend. We'll work some guys out before the game potentially to see if they can go. But it's a challenge in putting that puzzle together and kind of knowing who you're going to have and who you might not have.
It is, and I'm sure it's the case for all teams around the NFL. You mentioned something in the opening segment about noticing that the Lions coming out of their bye week in a game in which they went into Pittsburgh, albeit without Ben Roethlisberger, took them to the limit, had a field goal attempt to win it in overtime that was mishit, and it ends in a tie. But you said schematically they changed coming out of their bye week. Let's start on the offensive side. Clearly, a renewed emphasis on running the football and being physical up front. What did you see from the Lions offensively coming out of that bye week?
Yeah, I think you hit it. It was a physical rush attack. They got big offensive linemen. Obviously, Coach Campbell, a former tight end, threw a bunch of tight ends out there, including throwing an extra offensive lineman who was playing tight end out there. And it was a downhill run attack. And now we need to find out if that's who they were for one game or if that's who they are going to be for this game. The conditions were it was rainy and windy and wet, so you don't know if that was just a reaction to that, but we anticipate that that's going to be pretty true to who they are in trying to pound the football via the run game.
And if they aren't running it, they're doing a lot of what I would call long handoffs, right? A lot of passes at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, yards after the catch, accounting for 61% of the Lions passing offense this year. That's the highest percentage of lead by a wide margin, by the way. How important is tackling this one? Because when you do put on that Steelers tape, I'm sure Mike Tomlin, he said it after the game, we helped them out. They missed at least 10 tackles easy in that game that led to big plays. How important is tackling this week?
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. And you're right. There are a bunch of plays out there where the Detroit player, they're not going to give up. They're going to fight for every extra yard. So tackling, while it's so important technique-wise for the individual tackler, just as important is getting 11 hats around the ball, being relentless in your pursuit to the ball carrier. It typically will ensure that you're a good tackling team.
All right, defensively, how have the Lions changed coming out of their bye week and what you saw against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so front-wise, they were playing a couple different personnel groupings, a couple of new fronts. You know, Jamie Collins is no longer there on their team they had earlier in the season, so they're just adjusting a little bit to their personnel, which you'd anticipate they do. And then coverage-wise, they kind of play what they play. There's some man in there. There's some cover two. That's Aaron Glenn, who was in New Orleans, which is very similar, with Dennis Allen playing some cover two, playing some 3D. So they pressure third down. They're going to come after you. They're going to roll up and challenge you on the perimeter. So they have a really sound defensive attack.
I know that at 5-5, this is not a time for us to take anything for granted. But, sometimes guys see a record. They see 0-8-1, and then you can end up in a situation like Baltimore where they needed a 4th and 19 and the longest field goal in history. You go see the Steelers, who are probably feeling pretty good about themselves, and all of a sudden they end up tied. How do you just communicate the intensity and the necessity of this football game against a team that is doing everything it can clearly to find a way to win?
Yeah, it's the NFL. The parity in this league is unbelievable. Anybody can beat anybody on any given Sunday. So it's just so important that we have a great work week. We just have to. And I think the leadership on this team understands what's at stake, and we'll make sure that we're ready to go.